Okay, so hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitstocks Podcast. In fact, it is the first episode of the new year. We have officially put 2020 behind us, and this year is all about solutions, building, moving forward. And our first guest is none other than Jack Liu. Jack, how are you, my brother?
I'm good, fresh on a new year, and lots happening in the space as always. So how are you?
100%. And you are definitely someone who's been like super active and always very active. You're always like quite active on Twitter, sharing your opinions. And also you're a guy who's got very strong opinions, but also you build, which is freaking awesome, right? How was your Christmas? How was the new year? How's things been?
Was stuck here in Hong Kong, but we had a lot going on building wise, hung out with some friends. It's good. How was yours?
Yeah, I mean, as good as Christmas, I guess, can be in this climate, we just kept it really mellow, very chilled. I'm not going to tell you how many family members were there because I don't want to get in trouble. So we just had really enjoyed Christmas, and the new year. There was no buzz for the new year this time around. It was just a relaxed one again, family. There were a few parties going on, but again, I don't partake in things that I shouldn't be partaking in. So just a relaxed one, dude. What's the vibe like?
Good,
it's Hong Kong you're based, right?
Hong Kong's my base for the moment, yeah.
What's the vibe? What's the vibe like?
Look, I think there's a lot of frustration because it's obviously very densely populated city. And it's an international hotspot. So you want to keep the commerce going and the tourism going. But there's been the fourth kind of round of COVID. And this one was the toughest. Numbers keep on spiking. And it's going to be the case, I think, until Chinese New Year that people are kind of restricted in the movement.
But what's the perception, though, of the people in Hong Kong? Because like Hong Kong has had a pretty rough time last couple of years, even before COVID. Like you guys are quite controversial 2019, right? So with all the protesting and obviously China effectively wanted to reconsume Hong Kong. And then you had obviously the situation from Wuhan breakout, which is just like on your doorstep, right? And now you're in a situation that you guys experienced last year along with everyone else in the world. I mean, just in terms of like sentiment of like people in Hong Kong and just like the vibe, what's it been like the last couple of years?
I kind of, as you know, when in Bitcoin, you're kind of removed from it. You're not really close to the local economy. So I think there's a lot of people who have moved to the UK actually, or applied to move elsewhere. People are not being as hopeful for the future, but we'll see how it goes. I think the whole world is in that state.
What's it like being there as an entrepreneur though? Did you feel like you had to make a decision around that, or do you feel like you've got the...
I actually, so I had worked in Hong Kong back in my banking days, and I went to Beijing and Silicon Valley during the early crypto years, and Hong Kong became the first international office for OKCoin, where I was a chief strategy officer there, and they've grown since to be very large. And I think it led to a lot of companies locating in Hong Kong. So now it's home to famously BitMEX, it's home to FTX, Huobi. All the players are kind of domiciled in Hong Kong, even the famous kind of officially the Bitfinex, iFinex group that's backing Tether and things like that. So not sure how big the BSV community is. I think actually a couple of the kind of anonymous type of builders in BSV are actually based in Hong Kong. So nice. That's been a good.
Well, I imagine you're championing that community and the BSV torch for Hong Kong. Is there any like meetups, or well, obviously not last year, but was there like a bit of a meetup and a kind of a social circle around SV? Was that something that you'd like to establish out there?
Yeah, there has been some meetups. I don't kind of take leadership on that, but Hong Kong's very, very big around the BCH days.
Yeah, I remember. I used to come out quite a bit around those days. Yeah, I think Shape the Future conference I remember going to.
Yeah, Shape the Future conference, and then sort of it was the place where the Chinese miners would come convene with the West.
Yeah,
I know Craig
I
Wright
remember.
came over a few
Where
times.
all the arguments will break out.
Yeah, exactly. Roger coming in from Tokyo was easy for him too. And so not so much the BSV scene, but I remember it was very hot around the BCH time.
So what would you like to discuss? What would you like to talk about, Jack? I mean, is there certain things that in the last year, especially in this space, what's going on that you would like to address? And how do you see the last year for our community and the technology that we're building in this space? How do you see the last year?
I think this is a great sort of reset point or reflection point because, people were very amped in the first year of the technology coming out. We were told that don't expect too much to be built because it was just year one. Then we had early last year, the Genesis upgrade. I think that got people really, really hyped up. Obviously, no one could have seen the COVID thing happen. But even still, people thought year two with Genesis, we're going to get an explosion. There was a lot of chatter about sort of other blockchains kind of being on the demise. And I think right now, it's a great point to look at it like, okay, sure, some applications have been built. And I think the excitement over those are sort of starting to come off. And the user base is starting to be like, okay, what's next? We've seen the Twetches, we've seen the Streamanity, we've seen a numerous number of wallets that look like you got some functionalities of Bitcoin, like fast payments and the logging in and blah, blah, blah. But what is the breakthrough? And I think there's a lot of sort of pent up frustration because I think people took a very intellectual view when they came into Bitcoin. And not just the macro environment of crypto, but the whole world economy environment is making people say, if this is supposed to be a solution for our people, I'm seeing a huge distance between where we are now and where we get there. So the conversation I want to be having is sort of, where are we really? How do we accelerate that transition? Are we doing something wrong? How can we improve?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that statement, that sentiment. And that's like the epiphany moment we had a few years back. I was like, we continue in this direction. Like, no one's actually building anything. No one's building anything that really means anything to the person on the street, right? And when is that really going to spark? And I know we've, as a community, have been championing that notion that it's our responsibility to start building things that people really do need. And we're getting there, definitely, most certainly. We are 100% getting there. But I will still say, as a collective, we haven't really broke through even our own technical barriers of achieving really what this technology can do for us even right now, right? So you mentioned say Twetch, Streamanity, these are great concepts, right? To show how the issues that we experience in say social media, this technology can start to address these. But then at the same time, from a user experience standpoint, we're still not quite there yet. To make it really truly seamless, that the transition away from where the density is, so in this case, YouTube in Streamanity's sense, or Twitter in Twetch's sense, where it's quite difficult still to make the argument of a smooth transition. Something I do want to ask you about, considering obviously your position in regards to Streamanity, is what do you feel we need to unlock to allow services like Streamanity and Twetch to go to the next level? Like, what's next?
Yeah. So I think we too much. Streamanity obviously was a company that was founded by two other people. They work on it tirelessly, even from the BCH days. So this was kind of already been through a couple of years of tests and trials and errors and struggles. And I think there's been a pop since we took it over. But as you know, even now, it's not a mainstream type app. Neither is Twetch, right? And I think too much of our interests have been laid in terms of proving a point, in terms of hey, look, you can do this, you can put this on the blockchain. But on a macro level, right? Like Twitter came in 2007, and you had already made your decision to get a computer, get on the internet, get a cable connection. You didn't do that because of Twitter. And so the fact that Twetch is amazing, the fact that Streamanity is amazing, is that really going to make people change their wealth from using the pound to using the blockchain? because that's one application of potentially many, right? And so you want to see the ecosystem of use cases grow. And I think the struggle of these platforms to get mainstream attention, I think it really is alarming, because if you think about it, the last 6 months have been the greatest potential sort of tailwind for the adoption of these platforms, with the whole censorship, right? Censorship, people, even the president of the United States is getting tagged on every single post, right? And then you ask yourself, okay, why is the adoption going to Parler?
Dude, and BitChute. I personally now use BitChute more than I do YouTube, right? And I'm looking at these same things as well. I see BitChute has a little thing in the corner say that we accept crypto as payment, right? That's not the technology. You're just accepting it as payment. So we are burning an opportunity here. Like, we should be, this is our time. Like, this is our time. Because
there probably isn't going to be a controversy the next election cycle or something. So what did you just miss? You know what I mean? So I guess I just want to say that, in terms of the adoption of blockchain, and I think blockchain represents a technology that, just like all technology, can be used to do good or just to do harm. Like a nuclear can be used for great cheap energy, or it could be used for really explosive weapons against humanity. Same with guns, etc. And I think a lot of us, you and I think when we discovered Bitcoin, we immediately jumped to potentially the benefits that it can bring to humanity. And I think over the years that we've been in this industry, I don't think we've gotten more cynical, but we have come to the realization that a lot of our peers in the wider space are trying to use blockchain for whether it's just sheer greed or power grab and things like this. And so if you take a step back, we know that blockchain is the only potential solution to all the things I love that you've put out with the site series, to fraud, to election, to transparency, the financial system. And the only blockchain that can do that right now, has a hope of doing that, is the BSV blockchain.
The only blockchain that ended last year lower.
The only one that ended last year lower. Yes.
The only one.
The only one.
Let's talk about that. What do you reckon? What do you reckon's going on there?
Yeah, so I think it's very clear the two things are happening. So absent, I think, the macro stuff of the money printing and the COVID and the economic injection of funds, I think, BTC and Ethereum and these other chains would have stayed relatively tepid. And then BSV had a shot last year to take off if it had utility. And it obviously didn't gain massive utility, so it kind of stayed level or didn't do much. But that's when you're comparing which chain can scale, which chain can have utility on the blockchain. But when you take a step back and understand that the people who are just getting money printed on, who are just freaking out about that, looking for a safe haven, they're not comparing each of the different blockchains. They're comparing buying oil, buying gold, buying stocks, buying whatever, bonds, versus buying Bitcoin. And they've been told hesitantly for 5 years to jump in. They were like, okay, maybe I should buy Bitcoin now. Maybe I should buy Bitcoin now. And they're not going to, now that they really need a protection of some kind of store of value, they're not going to analyze, okay, but really, what am I getting into? They're just thinking, this is what the shared consensus is going to be. Let's buy it. Let's get out of it when the COVID is over. But I don't really care about using the blockchain. And so that's where BSV suffered, because it doesn't have that easy kind of name recognition.
100%. And do you know what I find quite interesting as well? Because it is kind of like the notion that BTC and the crypto space as a whole is a hedge against government and political instability, right? But it hasn't really played out in actuality. When we actually had the pandemic break in the Western world, everything sold off. Everything sold off aggressively. And if there was a moment where Bitcoin was going to decouple and stand on its strengths of the community sentiment at the time, which is, okay, this is meant to be a anti-establishment thing and it's a hedge against instability, yada, yada, yada. It didn't demonstrate that. And then you look at the rest of the year as to how Bitcoin performed in relation to stimulus. It's just correlated with the US stock market and the stimulus situation. The thing that's unique is obviously the money printing ability of a certain institution with a T, ends with an R. Apparently, you said based in Hong Kong too, which is an overwhelming benefit the crypto space has, which also massively contributes towards why SV hasn't really aggressively pumped in the same way because it is very starved of USDT volume. And it's like you could say, okay, well, on the one side that's like relatively good, right? Because you don't have so much of that BS coming in, but we do really need to stand on our own laurels and be able to deliver on the aspects that we need to deliver on, which is bringing true, genuine utility. But it's like the sheep herd mentality is becoming more increasingly difficult to rebuttal against, because right now they're all like super happy because they're making a great deal of money. And I'm actually happy for them, like great, like sweet, great. But then use it as an opportunity to then understand the technology a little bit better. Right? And I think that's the aspect that is really, truly lacking. And I do think that we as a space and as a community will start really breaking through this year and showing real applications. I know, for instance, my personal objective with how I want to go about this year in relation to Bitstocks and Gravity and what we're building is I don't want to come across like really aggressively partisan, right? I don't want to come across like really aggressively super BSV and F everything else, right? The reason why I am BSV is because I just want to build technology that affects humanity, right? Stuff that really does genuinely make a change. So I don't care that Craig is supporting the project. I don't care about the fact that other people feel a certain way about Ethereum or other people feel a certain way about BTC. Genuinely, I really don't care. The only thing I care about is like, what can my company build, and does it work, and will it continue to work as I forecast my roadmap, right? So we want to start positioning ourselves to be a little bit more inclusive to the ideologies that these other people have out there, but also find some interesting and smart ways to demonstrate the differences. And I don't mind throwing this idea out there because if someone else builds it, I'm happy for you to build it. If you don't, I am going to be inquiring about this myself. And that would be if you just create a video game, right? So you create a video game that's plugged into the blockchain, BTC, BCH, BSV. You have a laser blaster, right? And you have the same common enemy to defeat. It could be a big asteroid or whatever. So you could be going for a high score or you could be defeating an asteroid. Now, when you load your laser gun on BTC, you put $10 in, how much bullets am I gonna get? You have the same rate of Satoshi for your bullets. I'm probably gonna get $2 worth of purchase of like bullet power, right? So if I'm gonna complete the game and destroy this meteor, it's gonna cost me maybe $300. I have to keep on funding it. If I then play the BCH version of the game, it's going to be considerably cheaper. I'm going to be able to get a lot more of my bullets out of the gun. I'm going to be able to potentially complete the game, but maybe midway between completing the game, I have two guns all of a sudden because the chain freaking forked, right? And it's split. And then now my gun's malfunctioning. And then you can have the BSV variant and a BSV version where you've got genuine micropayment ability that you can actually utilize the bullets, and it's cheaper. You could complete the game maybe for only a couple of bucks, right? And I think this is really what I would love to see kind of come out the space, and it's definitely something that we're going to look at ourselves. It's just a really more interactive and non-offensive way of communicating the differences of the technology, right? And I think we do need to be a little bit more inclusive, and we need to stop isolating ourselves and coming across almost as aggressive as the other side, when ultimately we should just be focused on building technology that really people don't care about where it's coming from.
The analogy I like to make is if you got the power of the internet with nothing built yet, and you're caught up with people who want to support the fax machine, the last thing you should do if you're that confident that you have the bigger guns here is engage in an argument or force the other side to feel bad about fax machines and things like this. Okay? If you're doing that, it means you might know the internet is the future, but you have no clue how to make the internet be adopted. So I think that's a telltale sign. I think on year 3, you can't be doing that anymore. If you do that, in my opinion, I just actually block you, even if you're in BSV. I don't want to hear from you. You know what I mean? And I think what you're saying, I think there was a shooter game where you actually were shooting the transactions on the network.
Was there?
And yeah, there was a game called Transaction Shooter. This was in the early days of BSV, and there were very few transactions coming down from the sky. This is like the Atari game where you have a little fighter jet, and you shoot that. And you can actually play in the beginning, and you had a chance to take a sip of coffee and then go back to the next transaction might come down. And then when the Weather SV and all these other apps that were pushing trades on trend, it just you couldn't play. You could play 3 seconds at best. And so you can see from that game that there's a lot of transactions. But I know what I want to push this space to do is have a different mindset. You see, here's my argument. Even if Craig Wright proved that he's Satoshi, I don't think the price on an overnight pump does more than triple. Let's be very optimistic. It triples. Okay, what does tripling mean? You're barely over BCH. Ethereum is at 30x BSV. You're going to be what? Still 3% of Ethereum? 5% of Ethereum, even if it doubles or triples. And then let's see what all the other things that people want. Okay, Binance relist BSV. So what? In isolation, this coin goes from today's 180 to 275. Coinbase as BSV, great, goes 450. So what? It still doesn't change the fact that on chain, there's nothing demonstrating that a user can gravitate to and be like, look, I'm not going to use Instagram. I'm going to use that exclusively. It doesn't change that conversation. So too much of the focus, even if you solve onboarding, for example, and I just gave you 2 examples of Coinbase and Binance, but you saw it around the world, right? We've missed the opportunity for people to say, okay, it's easy to buy BSV, therefore I'm going to buy it. That's not the way the world works. Just because you make something easy to buy and it's carried at 7-Eleven everywhere doesn't mean people are going to buy that product. What you want to do, and this is the learning lesson from Ethereum, they weren't going around trying to make Ethereum on and off ramps really easy. They had stuff built on Ethereum, whether you like it or not, scams or whatever you want to call it. They have different tokens. So now I'm interested in CZ's project called Binance. I want to buy BNB. But to get BNB, I got to get some Ethereum to buy BNB. You see what I'm saying? So you got to give the user base a huge amount of variety of economic activity. So a BSV economy is not going to be 8 billion people owning BSV and then just life is better. That doesn't mean make life better. You should take advantage of the ledger, have commercial activity on the ledger between different tokens, between different counterparties, so that the draw is a good or a service. The draw is not BSV itself. But once you're in there transacting every day, using BSV every day, even if you wanted to get out of BSV every time, you're just going to find it better to just keep a few lying around. So I think that is the challenge, but obviously you don't get that from just reading history about Bitcoin. You have to get that from being creative, taking risk, and putting something out there and see if it gets adopted. And I think that's why it doesn't.
I totally agree with you. And I feel that the whole compliant law, welcome to law notion that we've built in this BSV community, I agree with it to a large degree because I'm operating my business and I'm conducting how I build my business with these parameters, right? So I take it very seriously. But at the same time, I think the way that it's being communicated has terrified a lot of people from interacting with this space, right? I'm talking about BSV uniquely here. That kind of free thinking of let's build and arcs later, right, has been void from here. And that's the thing that really did take Ethereum off. And I agree with you. It's like, yeah, cool. Some of these things are very scammy, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them have come from good intention, which retrospectively might be considered outside of scope, but that's not what these guys were trying to do. So we shouldn't tarnish all of them with the same brush, right? But if we look at what it done, it means it brought a lot of development to Ethereum. It's a broken platform, and a lot of people tried to work out and are still trying to work out how to let their creativity flow. Anyone who sees that as a negative is crazy, right? That's hugely positive, right? And it's a necessary thing for any technology really to like break through. We have to rip it apart. We have to feel okay and comfortable to play around with it. And also, like, you've got to feel accepted, right? A lot of techies, in particular, are quite introverted, right? Apart from online, then they will turn into keyboard warriors, and they're the most extroverted people. but when it comes to, okay, like meetups, and I've seen this like literally myself, every single time I go to a meetup or I go to certain events, that people tend to be like quite shy around like interacting and like joining a new circle and stuff. It's hard enough being human and building new friends as it is, to then be assholes as a collective community and make it even more difficult for these people to come and just ask the question. Say, look, I'm pro Ethereum, I'm pro BTC, I'm pro EOS or these other projects, but to some things that you've said in the BSV community that does actually make sense, but it's contrary to what I understand. What do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And we accept that person and we answer that person's questions, right? We haven't really kind of put out that vibe too much, and I think it's screwing us over to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, if the logical thing to think about this is that the more the chain scales, the cheaper the transactions, the faster the transactions, the more it should open up the possibilities of creativity beyond even what Ethereum was able to deliver. Because if I have a token idea that needs 1 cent transactions, Ethereum doesn't offer me that. So there's this kind of unseen creativity that cannot be visible on the Ethereum network that should be surfacing on the BSV network. And you don't see that because we're not challenging people to be as creative as you can. When they do that, they're not the ones featured in our community. They're not the ones talked about. We have this kind of historical leadership complex of who has thrown the most money into the ecosystem, who was supposedly the inventor of Bitcoin. That is great. That is great. Well, let's build them a museum. Let's give them into a meeting with the queen or something. But beyond that, let's support the people who are on the end busting their ass. And I think the competition should be how quickly can you get to $10 of profitability? How quickly can you get $100? How much different things can you build on the blockchain? I think we need that energy.
Oh, 100%, dude. 100%. I could agree with that more. On fees, however, and this has like been a hot topic recently at Bitstocks, is UTXO's fees, transactions, the building of our transactions, like how many outputs can we have? Like how dense can I really make a freaking transaction? And when does it become like completely economically unviable? And what is that economic unviable point? And then now I need to kick into being a human being. I need to pick up the phone and make a business deal, a business arrangement with a miner. What's the price at that point? That then brings it back into viability. This is the huge positive and unique factor that we have in this space that is structured and is organized in such a way. But then if you look at the blockchain and you look at I'm talking about BSV blockchain, we're not really seeing an explosion of UTXOs.
No.
Why do you think that is?
Again, I think there's just not a network effect going on. You look at an app like the Streamanity. Okay, how many times am I going to post a video? Once a week? How many times am I going to use Twetch? 4 times a day? I mean, just because it's Twetch doesn't mean I'm going to use it 3 times more than I do Twitter, right? Even if I match Twitter, it's only 3 or 4 times a day for the power users, right? And then you get burned out. You're like, I want to get off of Twitter. The same thing's going to happen to Twetch, right? You just can't be on it all day. So what kind of other types of transactions can there be going on? I think that's the misconception is when people talk about UTXOs on the chain, they think all transactions on the chain are the same. So I think there's something valid about the criticism of the type of transactions that are happening on the blockchain. So if it's coming from a single organization like Weather SV, no matter what data you're putting on chain, there's no commerce as far as I know right now. It's not like another business is picking up that weather data and paying a 1 cent fee or something to kind of see it. There's no commerce from that, right? That is just one data dump. I mean, I could dump all my homework that I've done and put it on the chain too. Like that is valuable to me, but unless someone pays me to see that data, you're not creating commerce. And so I think there are people who think of the transactions as like a be all and end all, and are even in that at the enterprise level looking for some major company to essentially, in my opinion, do like a major data dump on the blockchain, and thinking that's going to set an example to somebody else. You know what sets an example? When you freaking make money. If you're just dumping it and it's immutable, that's not making anyone any money necessarily. You know what I mean? So that, and if you look at what made something like Ethereum or even Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, something like that work, is you are doing transactions between people on those DeFi protocols. I'm putting a lending out there. There's a market. There's an order book for people to put in bids for offers. That's a transaction. We should be doing more of those type of things, not kind of single player games of an enterprise putting transactions on chain, I think you'll be sorely disappointed by the performance of BSV if that's all you get this year.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. I agree with that. And so the things that you are excited for then this year, talk to me.
I want to see tokens. So last year I would have said that we need to have meetings, we need to have a standards committee, we need to make sure we're on the same page, all the wallets are interoperable, because we have seen the success of the basic sending of money between wallets using Paymail. So everyone was thinking, okay, let's just go with tokenized, or let's go with Run, or let's go with something. And I think by the end of the year, you went from having no token solutions to having way too many token solutions. So I think we're at this point where I would like to see one wallet or one application run with a single token protocol, whatever it is they might be choosing, and try and build the biggest motherfucking company they can. And then everyone else is going to follow, right? So I think this year, first half of the year, is going to be people launching different things. I think one thing I will caution entrepreneurs from doing is don't just build a Uniswap copy on BSV just because you can. Just because Uniswap was big on Ethereum doesn't mean the exact same copy just because it's faster and cheaper on BSV is going to bring it over. Ultimately, Binance took over the space in 2017 because they were offering 50 coins for trading in a time period where everyone else is offering 2 or 3, which means there was 47 new things you can do on Binance, right? So if you just port over the same kind of tokens from the Ethereum blockchain over here, the user, you might think, cares about, oh, I save a few dollars on transaction fees, but they're already used to it, right? It's like you can't, your internet can't just be cable TV on the internet. It's got to have other content on it. So I think that is where we going to see a second half of the year, a bit more creativity of, okay, well, a token can work like that, and it can be that cheap. What other apps can I do that, like crypto fights, we're doing tokens within games and things like this. You got to put it into a different environment, whether it's VR or something like that, that is less about kind of decentralized speculation on token prices and things like this. But the tokens in general is a big excitement point for me.
You touched on something interesting there. You said standards, right? So standards of operation between companies in this space. That's something I actually feel quite passionate about. Definitely something I'd like to explore a little bit more here. Give me an example of some of those things. I'll throw one just to spark it off, and then give me a little bit more. So something that I would love to be implemented across key players in this space is the notion of blacklist, whitelist. Well, not whitelist, just blacklist. So let's say Gravity never happened, touch wood, never happens, but Gravity gets breached, someone steals funds from Gravity, and immediately, as soon as that money leaves Gravity, it sends the flagging system, goes to the miners, goes to RelayX, goes to Streamanity, goes to Handcash, goes to Twetch, and if that money hits any one of these wallets, immediately you guys know, and it's instantly put on freeze, right? And that gives us enough time to have law enforcement do the right processes, track this down, and we can have those coins hopefully eventually returned back to their rightful owner, and then boom, you're rocking and rolling again, right? Now, that's not just a technical thing, that's a business thing as well. That's a bunch of guys and girls all agreeing that we as a community are going to set a standard of operation that ensures it's very difficult to steal and commit certain criminal activities on this chain, because you then be limited in this scenario to a reference wallet that wouldn't have, say, these things plugged in. But then, okay, you've got your balance on your reference wallet, but then what the hell do you do with it, right? You're going to send it to Twitch, you send it there, they already got the address notification, so it'll be frozen there. You send it to Relay, we're going to send it there for. So where you're going to try and liquidate, it makes it harder. And the harder it is, the more time there is for law enforcement to do what they need to do, right? So that's something that I personally, when I really think about holistic security practices in a blockchain world at scale, there are human things that need to come into this, and like business arrangements and agreements that need to come into this. What's something that you've thought about?
I agree with that, and I think what I think is interesting is that you need a lot more value to be on the blockchain for topics like what you just mentioned to kind of be at the forefront. From the perspective of how it happened to be on BTC, once you have major companies be VC funded and things like this, and they had licenses and they had to comply, I was the first round investor in Chainalysis, actually. And that was helping kind of tap into exchanges, monitor. At the beginning when we invested in 2015 or something, it wasn't very clear this was even a demand. That was still in the cypherpunk kind of phase of Bitcoin. And I think as more value comes online into BSV, and let's say at a chain value of $1,000 a coin or something like that, I think that conversation is going to be very, very important. And I think, you leading that is great. For me, what I want to see is just better kind of disclosure of kind of operating practices. I think there's a lot of hype right now around things like threshold signatures and different things where you're telling users, hey, you don't have to have your 12 words anymore. What does that mean? Who is holding on to the keys, right? You can tell me that you're a serious business, that you're not going to take the keys, but we don't know exactly what that means, right? So even if you are just running a traditional wallet, like the kind of non-custodial wallet, we ask users to do 12 words. I think we need better kind of protocols, make sure like people are reminded that this is not just your funds. A lot of people think like, okay, it's okay. I just only have a few cents on this thing. So if I chuck the 12 words and forget it, it doesn't really matter. But what's happening is you're now not on Bitcoin, especially BSV, you have data that's tied to your identity. That you're never going to be able to be verified that was you that actually did that action if you actually lose your wallet. So in some cases, the data might be even more money than the money that you're losing. So people just need to take very seriously. We've focused a lot on the convenience of using these wallets, but I think there's a conversation that to educate people more about the seriousness of that.
The more that I personally myself really looked into the wallet situation and the structure and the composition of transactions, how people are storing custody, how all the wallet providers are doing it. To be honest with you, it's always something that I push on to, I rely on David to do that, but I've really been doing a lot of that heavy lifting myself in like the last 6 months. And I'm looking at this with a more traditional framework of mind, like not being a decoder or anything like that. I'm like, this doesn't make no fucking sense, right? You're losing privacy. The only way that you can actually maintain privacy is if we have more users. When are we going to get out of this chicken and egg problem? I was like, we're only looking at it this way because you're all a bunch of fucking coders who have been arguing about this shit for like a decade. I was like, this isn't resolved from necessarily that angle. I was like, ironically, if you want more privacy, you need a bank. And I'm not gonna get too deep into this because I'm gonna start speaking about things I probably should be speaking about right now.
2022 plans.
No, it will be this year. But
good.
There are certain things that I've spoken about over the years with very good reason and good intent. Because I knew that we continue to research on these subject matters privately, they will come into fruition through our technology. And there's certain things that I've said around mathematics and like fractal mathematics, division, the biological inspiration of Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera. When I take that thinking and I apply it to wallets, how wallets are being stored, how we store our coins, and then you bring in the privacy aspect to it. The way that we're storing our information makes it very easy for a company like Chainalysis to do what they do, right? But even without having more users, I can't wait to let Chainalysis loose on what we're building here and ask them if they can find a needle in a haystack. And I'm pretty fucking confident they won't be able to. And also at the same time, we'll be legally and lawfully compliant, right? Because I just need to make sure that we've got the full trail of what's going on here. And we can show law enforcement whenever law enforcement knocks on the door and says, listen, I need to see all of Jack Liu's transactions because he's in a dodgy bug and he's been buying everything from Silk Road, right?
I wasn't around back then, but yeah.
But it's sometimes it's not the real deep, heavy lifting technical things that makes you see that there's a different way of potentially doing this. And I think the space has been very victim to that thinking since really conception. And something that I'm really trying to break even the techies here at Bitstocks out of when it comes to building Gravity, because you have to factor in a much more holistic factor that we are human beings, and as human beings we also interact with this system, and as a security factor and privacy factor, maybe we as organic machines can add something to this, right? That's definitely something that I want to see a lot more established standards around, is how we're actually storing our coins in the first place, and the standards in which we're storing our coins in the first place for things like future-proofing, true privacy on chain, tying back with what you just said, because some of the things that are truly valuable might actually be the data in itself. And I don't think that's really being factored in. As much as we say, own your own data, and we say all of these things, in terms of, okay, like who's thinking forward to make sure that we're setting things up correctly today, so you've got that and you could take that forward. Yeah, that's a huge point. It's not been taken seriously enough.
I got a question for you.
Go for it.
Do you think that our generation, you're in your 30s, right? I think I am as well. We kind of burned a lot of our 20s kind of in this fork war scaling debate, and we've kind of got scarred around all that. We've done, I think, a pretty good job of building the initial stuff on BSV. Do you see kind of this generation of first mover startups as just kind of setting the table, and ultimately when the table is better set and it's easier to build on Bitcoin, there's going to need to be like another generation that comes here. They're going to be the ones going to take this 100 million users, and kind of the opposition to BSV, the people who are fighting against us, don't want it to be adopted. We're going to end up spending too much of our time fighting that force, that our generation aren't going to be the ones who build that kind of. If you look at the internet, right, there was that early internet. There's some people get lucky, they're Amazon, they get to live on, but there was a second wave, the Facebook, the Airbnb, Uber, Twitter. Do you see kind of, because I think from my perspective, we were really excited that, okay, Bitcoin's unleashed, let's go, let's build. And then I think 2 years in, it's like slower than I think we had maybe expected. So kind of where do you see this generation of entrepreneurs being headed?
Funny enough, I see it as both, right? I think there's a lot of waste happening, and that won't amount to anything. And it's just going to lay down a primer of great ideas for better execution by other players later. Definitely 100%, it's only natural that happens. But I also think there are a few people in this space, and I have no qualms saying I definitely put you in that mix as well, okay, who are not going to be superseded in that way. Because we're having this conversation, for one, being aware of this shit, for one, and you're taking a human approach. You're actually trying to build technology because it aids being human. And I think that's a very important distinction, because if you spend too much time just being a nerd and then intellectually looking for brownie points online, on Twitter and all the rest of it, you're feeding your ego. You're creating your isolated universe. So when someone comes in who's actually building something that is not about you and it's about somebody else, they're going to take the opportunity. Absolutely going to take the opportunity. They'll be better capitalized, they'll be better strategized, and they'll just get shit done. So your ego is just going to end up effing you, as opposed to you building and having an ownership in this space. And as the space grows and moves forward and you become a titan, I think there's going to be few titans that emerge from where we are right now. But I do definitely see the potential of some entrepreneurs in this space getting to that status. However, what does it look like, and what other assistance and help do we need in order to get there? I don't think it's all on our own, all off our own back. There's a degree of, I'll say, a chain of events and luck that really needs to happen in order to unlock this space the way that I would like to see it get truly unlocked. So I'll talk about a couple of those. The whole world right now, in my opinion, is on standby until this US election result is resolved. The whole world is on standby. And I said this from like the Awakening series, like a couple of years ago, like September 2018. I was saying like, look, we're gonna go through a freaking period on this planet of truth realization and the corruption that is going on behind the scenes to get brought forward. Now, this is the very same corruption that was and has been holding this space back. This is the very same corruption that was and is allowing things like Tether to continue the way it's continuing. This is the very same corruption that, ironically, as we said, we've been gifted this period of 6 months of supreme clarity where we should have been beaming through this window that they've given us, and we're not quite beaming through that window quite just yet. How I see it going based on, say, a Biden presidency, I think it's going to be very difficult for us, Jack, for a couple of reasons. I think it's going to be very bullish in the short term for the overall crypto space, very bullish in the short term, because it's just a continuation more of like the Tether-like activities and whatever have you, until they get the central bank version ready. And then we're screwed. The whole opportunity to do this is gone. They will take over, and it's going to be a very draconian-like scenario situation. On a Trump presidency continuation, I think we're going to have a continuation of what we've been experiencing. So we've had a lot of regulation chasing up with bad actors, etc. I think it's going to be a much more free environment for end-chain strategy to really come through. Because as much as what people say about end-chain, when I look at the landscape of what's really going on, I fucking love what end-chain's done. They actually had to get the patents. Someone needed to lock down the patents, right? To really to ensure that we actually have a platform to fight and have a say. Someone needed to go out there and block the likes of IBM and these other big, huge actors from just taking the mickey, right? And pushing guys like us out of the scenario. But that fight is yet to really, truly take place. So there's a lot of things that I think are huge factors that will directly impact the success of people like you and me and what we're building within this space to go to the level and the scale that we hope all this will actually go. But I can very much see a route that this will all fall in line, and we, as a global collective, will have more freedom, we'll have actually less regulation, so continuation, basically what the Trump administration was advocating, that will reverberate around the world, and integrity and transparency becomes a core selling point of a business, right? If we go through a transition as a global collective of exposing corruption, what's the next consideration? How do we prevent it from coming back? How do we stop the shadows from returning? How do we keep the lights on? That's really what SV is. I don't care how anyone wants to use it. Your core selling point really should be about, in this transition we're going through, is you're using this in a way that provides your users you've got true brand integrity because you're providing your users true transparency. And that's a selling point as a business, like a real selling point as a business, off the back of the gift that the collapse of the old guard has given us. If we capitalize on that, we as a generation are on our route to be the next multi-billionaire billion-pound organizations, or billion-dollar organizations. And I see that happening for us within 5 years. The goal for Gravity and Bitstocks is to become a billion-pound company within the next 5 years. And I actually say that I'm being relatively conservative when I say that, right? And it's a few other factors that will really decide if that's really going to be achievable for us that are outside of our control. The things that are in our control, we know what we need to do. But there are things that are kind of outside our control that I'm keeping an eye on that will really help elevate players in this arena right now, setting up the foundations. But I also think that a thing that will aid us in getting there as well, for me, my whole ethos and mentality is we're not building this for us. We're building this for everyone else. So if we build this on the basis of a system of contributionism, where people can like connect with it and they can build their own stuff on top of it, and they can actually not only use the service, but they can become sovereign themselves by the fact the service exists because it's a tool. I think that again is another USP that I think people in the space should be looking at if you're building this type of technology. Well, we've kind of run out of time a little bit now. Last things that you want to discuss before we round things up? Is there anything that you want to mention that you've got going on in your roadmap that you want to discuss or touch on? Or any events? You got anything like Cambrian SV happening again, by the way?
Yeah, I think I would love to have you out for the first time.
Oh, 100. As soon as I could get on a plane and they're not going to try and stick a needle in my arm, I'm there.
Great, awesome. Yeah, we're not gonna hold one unless that's not a requirement. So, I think sometime in the summer we'll do one this year, in 2021, hopefully.
You flirting around with any particular locations, or is it going to be Asia?
You know, we've done one in Asia, we've done one in Europe. I think North America would be a good one to touch on. But maybe not America.
Yeah. No, if it's America, let's do Texas. I really want to go to Texas. I think Texas as a state is awesome right now. Everyone's going to Texas.
Yeah. Texas is a good one. I think maybe Canada. I'm biased. I'm from Canada, so Canada might be one. What I'm excited about for this year, sort of as a final kind of point, I think we are going to find a breakthrough app. And not as in mobile app, as in just like a utility, something you can do with Bitcoin that gets people excited, and not just a app that grows users, but somebody that can get out of this narrative of what Bitcoin SV is, and people can just see it without seeing Calvin or Craig, and see something that you can build that is actually saving. You know, you talk about efficiency and transparency and that kind of stuff. What if that can save a corporate department a whole bunch of money from, you know, whether you're using Bitcoin to do payroll or do whatever it is you want to use Bitcoin for? I think there's going to be, the pieces are rounding into form for someone to come in and make an app like that. We want to make sure we don't miss it, because whether those apps are going to use tokens, those apps are going to do worldwide distribution, want to be in the app store. We as a Relay wallet, we judge ourselves based on how we are servicing the businesses that are built on top of Relay, the people who use Relay. I think we've done a good job of, every time a new kind of really cool app has come out, like a TDXP trading app and things like that, they've kind of hit the Relay store in recent months, kind of early on. I think we want to be there and kind of grow with those kind of breakthrough apps this year. I'm looking for that from new entrants. I'm looking for new ideas. I'm not necessarily looking for somebody that did a CoinGeek presentation 2 years ago and now they finally launched. I don't think that's going to be the breakthrough moment. You know, let's be hopeful.
Yeah, 100. Well, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. Let's make sure that this is one of many, right? It's literally the first week of the year. So let's make sure this is one of many. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with myself and the space. And there's some private things we need to catch up on behind the scenes as well. So I definitely want to have a chat with you about some of that stuff. And Godspeed, brother. Keep fighting a good fight. Keep on being a beacon of light and knowledge, and keep challenging. I think what's really good about you, Jack, is you challenge, right? And someone who is so free and willing to challenge anything in a public arena, to me, is someone who I can vibe with, because I can tell that's someone who actually speaks their truths, right? So we definitely need more people like you in a space willing to be a very, very strong pillar to do that, and go against the grain if it's required to go against the grain, even within our own space. So keep on being you, my bro.
It's all with a positive intent.
Oh, 100%. And this conversation has clearly demonstrated that, right? We just want the space to grow, and we want this to help the maximum amount of people. And to do that, we can't have a mediocre mindset. We should challenge each other with good energy, but we should challenge each other, because that's the way that we're going to push forward, and we're going to have shit, and we're not going to be redundant. I'm not interested in becoming Blockbuster. Like we had this shit on lock at the beginning, and I'm not interested in becoming Blockbuster. So let's keep pushing forward and keep challenging.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you, Michael.
All right, man. All right, to everyone. So first episode of the year out. Love and light to everybody, and can't wait to see you again soon. Love and light. All the best. Take care.